Hi everybody, it's Courtney, and today we are working with embossing folders for the 25 Days of Christmas card series. I'm going to be making two very simple cards. I don't have a ton of embossing folders, but this one I did have in my stash, and if I can't find it online, I'll link something similar. So with this blue pearl cardstock here, I am marking off two lines on the back of the card panel. You won't end up seeing these. These are just basically for me to guide myself. I'm going to be running this through my Gemini twice. So each embossing folder has a deboss side and an emboss side, and it's pretty much opposite of what you would think it would be. So I want this to be embossed so that the snowflakes are raised up. So I'm using that black line and putting this in upside down, kind of lining that up so that the snowflakes are tucked right against that black line, and then I can run that through. I'm going to do the same exact thing with the other side, once again using that black line that I had ran across as my guide. So I'm basically going to have embossed snowflakes on the top and the bottom. Now for this silver pearl cardstock, I was going to kind of do a kind of a diagonal thing, but I ended up just embossing the entire thing because I figured this will show you guys that you really don't have to do a ton to cards to mass produce them. And let's face it, this time of year, we are making more cards than ever. So I'm going to be using the debossed side for that silver one. Next, I'm going to treat these panels with my anti-static tool, and I'm taking an Emboss It pen from Ranger, and this is basically a Versamark or an embossing ink in pen form. And I am filling in these little dots that are part of the embossing folder, but I'm also kind of just adding some random ones. Just randomly, just whenever I see a little bit of a gap, I'm going to add just a dot there. Now I can sprinkle on my embossing powder, and I am going to be using silver embossing powder by Hero Arts. And obviously I'm going to make both of these navy blue and silver, but they're just going to be a little bit opposite. And I love this color combination. I saw Dana Joy do a video not too long ago for her Christmas card series using this color combination, and it was gorgeous. So it's very different from her card. Her card was absolutely stunning, but I loved the color combination. So next I am going to use my anti-static tool on this silver, which kind of looks white on camera, but it is silver, I promise. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm filling in these little dots. Now remember, this is the debossed side, so they're not raised up. They're kind of sunk into the card panel. And again, just adding some random dots. Now I'm going to change this up a couple of times as we go, because like always, I really didn't have too much of a plan going into this. And you guys typically know that I change my mind as I go along. So this time I'm using this blue embossing powder by Simon Says Stamp, and it's steel, navy steel, I think it's called. I'll link it below. It's one of my favorites. It came in a card kit a long time ago, but it has kind of a pearl look to it, but it has the navy color. It's gorgeous. So I went ahead and heat set all of that. And as I was heat setting this silver panel here, the dots were just not looking right. And I think it was because there was in between these little dots that are part of the embossing folder, there's kind of like a little outline to them. And obviously that didn't have any embossing on it. So I really wasn't loving it. So I went back in with that embossing pen and I went over kind of a larger area. So the little outline around all of these little circles, I ended up filling those in, which I'm kind of glad I did, because had I actually used this panel in the long run, I noticed that one of them especially was not totally heat set, and it kind of just wiped right away as I was using my Emboss It pen. So I'm glad I ended up doing this, because ultimately I would have just rubbed that off with my finger. So I sprinkled on a little bit more of that blue embossing folder and heat set that. And at this point, I still wasn't loving it, but I thought maybe once I got the cards together, I would like it more. That was not the case, but we'll see in a few minutes how I change things around a little bit. I actually made it easier on myself, so I could have totally skipped this part had I wanted to. So now that my embossing is done for my card panels, we can start assembling the cards. I do have a ton of powder on these panels here, but once your embossing powder is completely cool, you can just take a microfiber towel and just kind of rub that powder away and bring back that shine, which again is kind of hard to see on camera, but these are really, really shimmery. So for this blue panel here, I am going to be cutting some strips, and I'm also going to be cutting a mat. So this is going to be matted on the silver cardstock. So I'm going to cut that just a tiny bit smaller than an A2 size. I'm also cutting a strip of that silver that is going to go directly in the center where the two little sections were sectioned off. Also cutting down my card panel a little bit. This is going to end up being 5.25 by 4. Also cut a blue strip here that's going to go in the center as well, but this is slightly smaller than the silver so that I'll see a little bit of that silver through. Going to bring out the winter stamp set by Honeybee Stamps along with the die set. Now for this card, I'm going to be using the stamps, and for the next card, I'm going to be using both the stamps and the die. So I'm using the large winter and the hugs, which is a smaller image. It's kind of used for sentiment strips. And I'm going to line that up directly onto my little strip of paper here. Once I have the placement down and the placement the way I want it, then I can pop this onto an acrylic block exactly the way it is. Once again, I will treat this with my anti-static tool, stamp that out with some Versamark, sprinkle on that silver embossing powder, and heat set that. Now, this paper has been in my stash for many, many, many years. I actually used this paper to make wedding invitations for one of my friends years ago. And I can't remember where I purchased it, but I have stacks of it left. And I often forget that I have it, but it's gorgeous. So if I can find where I purchased it, I'll link it below. It is pretty heavy. But if you guys do have a huge project like wedding invitations or something like that, this is great cardstock, and they have all different kinds. So once I heat set that, then I can assemble the card. Once again, I'm going to wipe off any of that extra powder that is kind of sitting on top, and everything kind of goes together pretty easy. I'm going to mat my blue panel or my embossed panel down onto my silver mat there, and just leaving a little bit of a border. This is going to bring in just a little bit more of that silver. Going to add the silver strip right across the center and the sentiment right across that. So I'll have just a little bit of that silver showing on the top and the bottom of my sentiment. Then just pop that onto a A2 size card base, and that is it for that one. Super simple. You could whip these out. You could probably make 50 of these in a day if you wanted to. So next I am going to work on this silver panel, and once again I did trim this down to 5.25 by 4 and also created a mat from the blue pearl cardstock that is just a little bit larger than that. Once I put these on top of one another, this is where I kind of changed my mind. But first I am going to use the dies from the winter die set by Honeybee, and there's 2 shadows and the word. I'm just going to use the one shadow and the one word, and obviously the word, and run that through my Gemini. Now remember, with word dies, if there's an I or an apostrophe, you want to save those, because I always tend to lose those and have to end up die cutting a whole nother one. But I'm just gluing the word down to the shadow and not forgetting about the little dot to my I. And this is where I kind of just placed everything together. I never glue anything down until I know that that's the way it's going to be. And I hated it. I really hated it. And I think it was the dots. I just didn't like the dots. So I ended up running another panel of the silver cardstock with that embossing powder, and I'm not adding any blue. I'm just going to leave it as is. Once again, I am using the debossed side just to kind of switch it up a little bit, and I ended up just adhering that down to that blue mat, just because I feel like this is enough. Like I said, you can whip these out. I typically send about 150 Christmas cards. Probably most of you watching, or at least some of you watching, will be receiving one. So they're not all going to take me 3 hours per card. I just don't have enough hours in the day. So some of them are very simple. So to finish off, I am going to add some sentiment strips below and above my large word die there. I lined that up onto my work surface using the lines just to make sure that they were perfectly straight with one another, and stamp those out onto this scrap piece of the blue cardstock. Now for the wishes, I press too hard. When you have a smaller sentiment like this, or even a smaller image, if you add too much pressure, you're going to make it kind of like globby. And especially when you use Versamark, there's no fixing that. So I stamped that once again just to get a better impression, sprinkled on that silver embossing powder, and heat set that once again. Let that cool down for a couple of seconds and wipe that with my microfiber cloth. And then I'm using my mini tonic trimmer to cut these down into strips. And I know I keep trying to link this trimmer below. Not too long ago, it was available on the Tonic website. I think it now is back out of stock. But keep checking, guys. I know this is like a hot item. This is perfect for sentiment strips and for small strips anyway. So just keep checking. I keep linking Simon Says Stamp and Tonic because I think those are the only two places that you can get it when they are in stock. So I cut those down, and I'm using some foam squares because I'm still out of foam tape at this point. So I just had to cut those in half and line those on the back of my sentiment strips. Stuck the one on the top of my word die and one on the bottom. And that is it. I was going to go for some Nuvo drops, but I figured why ruin it? Keep it nice and simple. It's very shimmery. It's just hard to see on camera. And it's a quick card. What can I say? So today's collaboration is with Annette, and her information will be linked below her video, and she's also going to be using embossing folders. Each day, in case you guys didn't know, is a different theme and a different collaborator, and I pretty much let them choose whatever theme we were going for, and I thought she picked... It was a good idea, embossing folders. I don't think to use them very often. So thank you, Annette, and thank you all. I will leave all of the supplies listed in the description box below. Thanks so much for stopping by, and have a great day. See you tomorrow.